All right, hello everyone. My name is Amanda Bloom, and welcome to our Google Hangout featuring this week's featured programmer, SiriusXM's David Srebnik. Congratulations, David. How's everything going today in DC?
It's going well, and I'm glad to be here with you.
Great. So as programmer for SiriusXM's Symphony Hall channel, what does an average week look like to you?
Well, there's a ton of programming. I'm programming the majority of the programs that are heard throughout the week. So I'm in Music Master a lot, hitting F9 and F1 quite a bit, and Alt F9, and trying to put together beautiful, pleasing, substantial blocks of music. I also do a lot of interviews with performers who either come in for an interview or maybe even a performance. Sometimes they're in our New York office, so I'll do an ISDN interview with them to create special programming. And I think I spend a lot of time listening to new music, new recordings that come in. I try and listen to at least one CD a day, more if possible. Some days, when the building's on fire, it's hard to listen to new music, so programming comes first. But that's pretty much a typical day and week.
Are there certain guidelines that you follow when deciding what music makes it into your programmation on the channel?
Yeah, my first and only priority is to serve listeners and to please them and to entertain them and to provide them something that's substantial, something I think that they will not just like, but love and want to continue listening to. So I think that is my first priority. I want to make sure that the recordings are sound good and the audio is up to speed. We are, in this very advanced technology, and I want to make sure that that's going on. And I think the key for me when programming is variety, making sure that from piece to piece, listeners are getting something different, not just slightly different, but different enough so that we don't always sound the same and always sound predictable. So I like to vary the setting from orchestral to chamber, orchestral to solo. I like to make sure that there's plenty of variety. So if the last piece had a lot of violin, I want to make sure that we are not violin-centric in the next piece. So substance, quality, enjoyability, and variety.
Do you ever take in feedback from your listeners, and does that affect your programming?
Well, that's a really controversial issue, because who is it that is contacting us, and how many people need to contact us before we would consider making a change? So, I get a lot of emails, and people are very active on Facebook and Twitter telling us the good, the bad, the ugly, and you try and keep an open mind. You try even harder not to take it personally. It's always great to hear someone say, that David Srebnik, he's ruined the station. So, you have to be really careful. And, our audience is in the millions. So at what point does, what's the number of calls or emails saying you're in big trouble that really mean you're in big trouble? So, you listen to these ideas, you listen to suggestions. Very often listeners are right. Sometimes it's a perception issue where we just haven't made the case right. But I've learned a lot from listeners, always have, and continue to look for their feedback. But I think the best critic that we can have is ourselves. And I think it's most important that we're always challenging ourselves and asking ourselves, why are you programming this way? Why are you programming this piece? Why do your intros always sound this way? Why do you write copy this way? Why do your interviews go a certain way? To always ask those questions, that begin with why. And then the next question is, what or whom are you trying to serve or please? And I think that's as valuable and maybe even more valuable if you're honest with yourself, if you ask those questions with everything that you say and play and do on the radio.
So speaking of, talking with other people at SiriusXM, do you ever share playlists with other channels there?
Well, not really, because, we're a classical channel, although I'm in the rock group. The classical channels are part of Hair Nation and the Aussie Osborne channel and the Grateful Dead channel and the Nirvana channel, their Bruce Springsteen channel. So they're not playing classical music. We do share ideas. You know, everything that we do always ends up on the radio. So there are a number of common elements and common values between the formats, even though the playlists are different. That being said, there are a number of people in the rock industry, the current industry, I mean, in the current field of musicians, but also dating back to, you know, the 60s and 70s. These artists are writing classical music now, some of it very, very good, some of it very, very interesting and you know, worth a listen. So when I find those artists and their music, I audition that music you know, very carefully and see if it's a good fit. There's a guitarist with a group called The National named Bryce Dessner, and he's writing terrific classical music. He's very active in the classical music world, but most people know him as the guitarist and co-founder of this band. But we feature his music a lot because I think it's beautiful. And whereas it might not necessarily fit the label classical 100%, it's classical enough that I think it's worth sharing with listeners and helping them discover. So earlier when you asked me, you know, what are my priorities, and I mentioned, you know, pleasing, enjoyable, substantial music and variety. The other thing is that I want listeners to discover music that they haven't heard of, or discover a composer they haven't heard of, that I humbly believe can stand up to the rest of the so-called classical music that we play. And I think there's nothing more exciting than having a listener discover something new along with you. And I think that's a great way to build a relationship with an audience and to bring in new audience members as well. But the bottom line with all of that is that the music is good.
Are you a fan of new music or more of a classical traditionalist?
Well, I'm a fan of all good music, some of it written in 1743, some of it written this year. So I'm always listening to new things and trying to discover something new, the next Beethoven or the next Murray Pariah. I try not to dwell too far and deep into the past, because classical music is a living, breathing thing, and it's being made today in ways that are just as exciting and innovative as they were 100 years ago. I have a strong commitment to new music. Regrettably, in classical music radio, new music is rarely played, or it's segregated to 3 a.m. And my feeling is that you might as well not play it if that's all you're going to do is play it at one specific time. I think it's our job to find ways to integrate it into the playlist using, you know, effective day parting and what would sound good at a particular time of day, but not to just leave it out in the cold when no one's listening.
Yes. So do you think with all the labels for classical music, there's new music, there's neoclassical, there's everything. Do you think the word classical is still a word that serves the genre well?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of baggage and bad baggage associated with classical music, whether it's in the concert hall or on radio. And to that extent, we have to work through that and grow out of that bad baggage. But humans like us, we work well knowing what something is. And so labels do have a place. It's how we implement that label and what it stands for. It's how we present it, how nice we are about it, how concise we are about it, how invigorating our language and content can be, that will really make it unnecessary to use a label, but it's a good starting point. Again, if it's really, really good, I mean, I love this kind of music that I say it's not classical, but it's not classical. So how do you label it? Well, that's the best I can do. Is it good? Does it bring people in? Does it make them want to hear more? I mean, those are the labels that I try and work with. But I'm not afraid of calling on the term classical.
Turning back to radio, as a former radio guy yourself, working at stations in Texas and North Carolina, is programming for SiriusXM a very different experience from the kind of programming that you were doing at local stations?
No, really not at all. I think it's almost exactly the same. We're thinking about the audience. We're trying to serve and please the audience, respect the audience, give them a good time musically and otherwise. So that's the common element, and I don't think that will ever change or should ever change. We have a few things that are different. For example, we don't run necessarily in 59 or 60-minute blocks. We can do a program special that's 28 minutes and not be worried about how we would fill the rest of that hour. For example, working on a series of programs with violinist Itzhak Perlman, and he wants to do a show on various recordings of one piece. And so we thought that's a great idea, but after the fourth or fifth time hearing that piece, we'll all be pretty much burnt out and everything will kind of sound the same. So this show will probably feature three completely different violinists playing the same piece. It's likely to be 18 minutes long, and that will be the show. So we have that kind of luxury and freedom. We don't have a newscast at the beginning of each hour. We don't necessarily have to run a message at a certain time. So we have that type of freedom, but really for the most part, we're all in the same business, and that's, I think, pleasing and serving audiences.
So when you're not programming music, what do you like to spend your time doing?
I spend the majority of my time away from the radio station gazing at my wife.
I love that answer. Well, thank you so much for being with us, and congratulations on being our featured programmer of the week. This will be up on YouTube on our Crossover Media YouTube page, so you can check out the Hangout there at your leisure. So thanks again, David.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.